Welcome to the third episode of Beyond Babylon, your insightful guide into the Near East. Today we're venturing into the verdant expanses of Afrin in Syria, to a small Kurdish Yazidi village called Basufan. The episode is a journey of personal reminiscence, cultural exploration, and historical understanding. We'll explore the profound struggles and indomitable spirit of the Yazidis, an ethnic religious minority. So join us as we traverse rugged terrains, delve into poignant narratives, and shine a light on the resilient spirit of the Yazidis. I'm your host, Nisan. Let's start. Each summer, we embarked on a journey to the bucolic sanctuary of Basufan, a Kurdish Yazidi village cradled in the verdant expanses of Afrin, part of Aleppo countryside in Syria. Although my formative years were predominantly spent amid the pulsating energy of urban cities, the annual sojourn to my father's ancestral village always took on an ethereal quality. It was more than a journey back in time. It was a spiritual exploration into the uncharted territories of the soul. Navigating the rugged mountain terrain in my father's gleaming brown Maxima wagon, we traversed the unpaved, uneven pathway, the vehicle rhythmically jostling with each bump and dip. Our auditory backdrop alternated between the soulful melodies of my father's favorite Kurdish singer, Shivam Berwir, and the passionate tunes of his beloved Lebanese icon Wadia Safi, a cultural pioneer in Lebanon's musical sphere. At times, the air was filled with the infectious rhythms of my late sister's preferred Egyptian hits or popular English ballads, as she gently insisted on her turn at the stereo. Caravan trucks driven by European tourists, keen on exploring the locale, were a common sight on the road. Our paths would intertwine en route to the village up until a distinct junction. At this point, the tourists would diverge towards the historic 5th century church of Saint Simeon Stylites, while we carried on, journeying an extra 4 kilometers to reach the village. Saint Simeon, a renowned Syrian monk, earned his fame as the foremost practitioner of asceticism, spending a significant portion of his life atop a pillar. The scenery was a lush tapestry of olive groves and fig trees, punctuated by the stoic presence of dry stone walls. These ancient barriers, stacked stone upon stone, demarcated the land, creating enclosed spaces for fields and livestock. The allure of adventure often proved irresistible, compelling us to scale these walls and explore the neighboring lands. My grandfather, a man steeped in the humble grace of rural life, maintained several plots of olive and fig trees, a modest vegetable garden, a dairy cow for fresh milk, yogurt, and cheese, and 2 horses. I fondly remember accompanying him to his plots, helping him carry the zuwadi, our lunch neatly bundled in his kufiyya or ghitra, as I knew it growing up in Saudi Arabia. My grandfather also worked in the village mill, often emerging draped in a soft layer of white flour. Just across the dusty road from my grandfather's abode, my aunt maintained her own menagerie: sheep, cows, a donkey, and an imposing Kangal dog. It was here that my cousins introduced me to the rustic tasks of milking sheep, horse riding, and egg gathering. Summers were spent in a blissful haze of outdoor exploration with my cousins, wandering through the fields and the ruins skirting our village. We climbed trees, savored fresh fruits, discovered wildlife, and watched as local farmers harvested wheat in its season. We'd perch ourselves on rooftops bordering the vibrant central square, the venue for weddings and communal ceremonies. During festivities, we seize our stainless steel dishes and race around the village, where giant pots filled with wheat were cooked. Each serving was generously dusted with sugar before being shared with all. In Basufan, the pulse of life ebbed and flowed with the seasons. I recall a ceaseless wind sweeping across my grandfather's house, as I lay on the rooftop, captivated by the dense star-studded night sky streaked with shooting stars. I can't recollect ever making a wish. I was simply entranced by the sky's stunning beauty. The village of Basufan is a treasure trove of history, with remnants from the Byzantine era still visible today, including the venerable ruins of the 5th century AD church of Saint Phocas. In 2011, Basufan, along with 40 other villages, received the recognition of being inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This accolade was conferred for, and I quote from the UNESCO website, the village's remarkably well-preserved landscape and the architectural remains of dwellings, pagan temples, churches, cisterns, bathhouses, etc. These sites, inclusive of Basufan, serve as a vivid testament to the pivotal transition from the ancient pagan world of the Roman Empire to Byzantine Christianity. The Yazidis, an ethnic religious minority that speaks Kurdish, traditionally reside in small communities dispersed across northern Iraq, northwest and northeast Syria, and southeast Turkey. Yazidism is not a faith one can convert to, rather, it's one that individuals are born into. The Yazidi New Year, known as Red Wednesday, occurs on the first Wednesday of April. To observe this occasion, many Yazidis visit the Lalish Temple, located in the Nineveh Governorate in northern Iraq. This new year symbolizes the onset of life, and it is celebrated with prayers, the lighting of fires, and gatherings with family and loved ones. The Yazidis are often unjustly perceived as heretics by certain Islamist factions. In 2014, the Islamic State terror group attacked the Yazidi town of Sinjar in Iraq, where IS militants executed thousands of Yazidi men and abducted thousands of women and girls, forcing them into sexual slavery. Such horrifying acts, which the United Nations equates to genocide, have left an indelible scar on the Yazidi community. Advocates for Yazidi rights report a similar grim narratives unfolded in Afrin, with Islamist groups reportedly seizing their lands and compelling them to either renounce their faith or abandon their homes. This continual persecution is a harrowing testament to the trials faced by the Yazidi community. According to a 2022 report by Syrians for Truth and Justice, the Yazidi community's suffering continues, exacerbated by subsequent atrocities carried out by an array of military factions, including those allied with the Syrian opposition coalition. These opposition groups stand accused of numerous violations against the Yazidis, particularly during and following the Turkish-led operations Olive Branch in 2018 and Peace Spring in 2019. Violations included confiscating people's properties and lands, ruining Yazidi holy places and graves, and persecuting Yazidis practicing their religion and traditions. Of particular concern are reports of Yazidi women in the Afrin region being arbitrarily detained by certain factions and subjected to enforced conversion to Islam. Before the Turkish incursion, Basufan was a hub for nearly 3,500 Yazidis. However, local sources indicate a drastic shift in this demographic landscape. The majority of the inhabitants have been compelled to flee, leaving behind a mere handful of residents, predominantly the elderly, with the count barely reaching into the dozens. Local human rights organizations said the 2018 Turkish invasion drastically altered the demographic composition of Afrin's 22 Yazidi villages. Once home to a thriving Yazidi population of 25,000, these villages now host less than 5,000 Yazidis, a stark testament to the extent of displacement caused by the offensive. Due to the absence of a government census, some sources like North Press Media estimate that the number of Yazidis residing in Afrin was around 50,000 prior to the onset of the conflict in Syria in 2011. My grandmother, a Yazidi, chose to remain in our village of Basufan despite threats from rebels insisting she evacuates or faces death. She decided she would rather die in her own home. The night she received the threat, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. Approximately 500 Yazidis, including my uncle and his family, sought refuge in Lebanon. Having lost their homes and opportunities in Syria, these Yazidi refugees continue to endure discrimination and oppression in Lebanon. My uncle, who lost his land and house, found himself confronting prejudice and intolerance with no feasible way out in Lebanon. Consequently, he chose to return to Syria, where he was captured, imprisoned, and tortured by the Syrian regime for reasons that remain unknown. The Syrian government has historically not recognized the Yazidis as a separate religious entity. As the nation's constitution specifically acknowledges only the Abrahamic faiths, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, as a result, the Yazidis lack a distinct personal status law. When it comes to legal affairs, they are obligated to follow judgments handed down by courts that are specialized in Islamic personal status law. The Syrian government has traditionally overlooked the Yazidis' historical presence, their unique religious sites, and their distinctiveness as a separate religious group. Under the rule of the Ba'ath Party in Syria, Yazidis endured years of discriminatory practices. These included hindrances to accessing education and securing employment, as well as challenges in purchasing and officially registering properties under their names. Civil groups, including ISDINA and the Syrian Yazidi Council, have been advocating for constitutional recognition of the Yazidis, along with guarantees to safeguard their political and civil rights. In addition, these groups have launched initiatives to raise awareness of the Yazidi religion and their societal presence, while also countering misinformation and common false narratives surrounding this minority group. Until next time, this is Nisan, your host, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Beyond Babylon podcast.